Every time I hear today's gospel parable, it takes me back to my childhood, because I remember probably most fondly in my years of childhood the amount of time I spent on the playground with my friends. And I would say that the most common phrase that was repeated over and over again on the playground was, "That's not fair." Because we were constantly playing games, and the definition of not fair was not the way I wanted it to be. Now we laugh because we've heard that from children. But we also tend to say that no matter how old we get. Our sense of fairness continues to revolve around what's in my favor. And so it's no surprise to us when we hear this gospel passage, and those who worked the hardest, as they pointed out, bore the day's heat. Well, they deserve more than the ones who only did a little bit of work. It's only fair. And so Jesus is very intentionally with this gospel challenging our notion of what is only fair. Now, this is a parable that lends itself to thinking about, well, where do I fit in the story? Now, of course, we tend to just presume we're the ones who worked the hardest and bore the day's heat, when in fact, probably we're the ones who came in at the last minute and deserved the least. So it should challenge us to think about where we stand in this story. Another way to think about this is that because the landowner, the one who is generously paying the wage, is God, well, God only has one wage: everything. What God desires for us is everything. And so it's the only wage that he has to give for all who come to him, regardless of when they come. But as I was reflecting on this passage recently, it struck me to take a step back and maybe think about a couple of different questions. A different way maybe to think about, where do I fit in the story? Not just which of those workers am I, where do I come into the work? But to think a little bit more about, what do the locations identified in this passage really mean? And so we have the marketplace. The marketplace where the owner is engaging the effort of his laborers. And then we have the vineyard, the place that the landowner sends them to do their work. And so let's think about those locations in light of our faith now. Where is the vineyard? Where is the marketplace? And I would suggest to you today that our gathering here today in this church, this is not the vineyard. This is the marketplace. Now, it doesn't mean marketplace in the sense of where we conduct business, the way we might think about it. Picture the scene as Jesus describes it. The center of the town was the marketplace. It's where people went so that they could get their supplies. It was where they purchased the things that they needed to live their lives. It is where, obviously, they go to look for work. And so it was a central hub, a place where they would gather, where they would be renewed and restored, where they would be given what it is that they need to do the work that they would do. That's the church. The point of the church is the place that we come so that all that we need can be given to us. So that here we can have the food that nourishes us. Here we can come into the encounter with the God who calls us to work. And so our church is the place where we come. And here we have the opportunity to encounter the Lord. Here, especially in the Eucharist, here we have the place of refreshment, so that the work that we undertake, we have the strength to do. And so then, where is the vineyard? The vineyard is everywhere else that you go. The vineyard is your place of work, whatever kind of work you might do. Your vineyard is your own home, where you are working to form a family of faith. Your vineyard is where you encounter those who work alongside of you. And so it might be work, it might be social. But it is everywhere that the Lord sends us so that as His laborers, we are bringing the life of God that we are entrusted with. We are the ones who claim the name Christian. We are the ones who are set aside to be disciples. And if we look at the pattern of how the gospel works, Jesus is continually calling His disciples close to Him so that from Him they can experience the rest and refreshment that they need, and then He sends them. Over and over again, He brings them close and He sends them. And so in this parable, we are gathered here for Mass. Jesus is bringing us close so that He can provide for our needs. But then He will quickly send us so that the work that He wants done in the world is done in the vineyard. Now, as we gather here today, we hear words of encouragement, words to remind us of what is happening. We started our first reading with the beautiful reminder of the prophet Isaiah, "Seek the Lord while He may be found. Call Him while He is near." That's the work that we do here in the church. And so every time you come into the church, whether you're gathering for Mass, whether you're stopping for a little bit of prayer, this is the place where you come seeking the Lord. This is where you call on Him because He is so near. And it is that continual renewal in the grace of God that brings us back time and time again. We should think about what happens here the same way that we think about eating our meals every day. When we have a really great lunch one day, we don't say, "I'm good now for the rest of the week." We need more lunch again tomorrow. And so when we gather with the Lord so that He can feed and nourish us, we come back and we come back continually because we are never at a point where we don't need the grace that He gives. But then, strengthened by this grace, out we go to do the work that He asks us to do. And so the real challenge of hearing this gospel passage is to think about not what is the reward that will come. That's where we tend to look first. That's where we get caught up in what seems fair or not. How could they get more than I get? The challenge that I offer you today is to look not at that reward, but at the work that is available, the work that God asks of us. And so think about the different areas of your life that are the vineyard where God sends you. And ask yourself, what is the work I am doing in the vineyard of the Lord? How is it that the way I conduct my business reflects the fact that I am a disciple? How does the way that I engage with my fellow workers reflect the values that come from being a disciple? Do I try to live out the virtues that come with following Jesus? Do I take in the words that He gives to teach through the words of Scripture so that that's the value that I bring to the life around me? Ask yourself about the vineyard that is your home. How do you go about helping fashion a family that grows knowing the love of the Lord? That sees both the need to go into the church and be strengthened and the need to go out and dedicate ourselves to the work of caring for our neighbor. How about our more social gatherings? When we are with friends, when we are on the sidelines of our kids' sports, how is it that we go about being disciples in those settings? That's the work that the Lord is asking us to do. And so I would suggest that if you do a real honest assessment and ask yourself, how do I reflect my faith intentionally? at my work and in my home and with my friends? If the answer is, well, I don't really, well, then you are the workers that haven't yet been engaged by the Lord. You are the ones he is coming back to the marketplace to look for, to say to you, I have work for you to do. I have a need for more laborers in the vineyard. When the owner of the vineyard comes looking, he sees people standing around, and they say, no one has hired us. So I want you to hear the voice of Jesus at this Mass today, hiring you to go into the vineyard that is your life. And as you undertake the work of being a disciple, understand that it is nourished by your encounter with the Lord, strengthened by what happens at Mass, so that what happens here can flow from the church into the world that is dearly beloved by God. And so we should listen to the parables of Jesus with an eye toward how does it fit my life? Which part of the story am I in right now? And we should hear the challenge that Jesus gives every time he tells a parable, so that I can hear the challenge that comes with his voice calling me, and I can hear the strengthening that comes from what he provides for his calling. As we celebrate your parish feast day, my prayer is that this will be the dynamic of the life of faith in this place. That you will come repeatedly over and over again to that place of encounter with the Lord and strengthened by him. That you will do the labor in the vineyard to which he sends you. That your life may reflect the relationship that you have with God in every part of your life.